I don't know how to describe it other than like a demon type of sound.
But it's silhouetted, hulking, every bit of 5.5 feet wide, 13 to 14 foot tall, pitch black.
The one thing that ran through my mind when I had this encounter was I don't have a big enough gun.
Your host, two-time witness and field researcher for more than 40 years, William Jevning. Welcome to Creek Devil.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to another edition of Creek Devil. We have Steve joining us today. So, Tom, do you want to go ahead and take off on this since you and Steve have spoken?
Yeah, we have. Steve, thank you for being on the show. And you and I did a little bit of an interview just not too long ago. You have an interesting encounter, and what I really enjoy about this one is the location. We're not going to give the exact spot out, but we'll say it's in Texas, East Texas, and Western Oklahoma. So take it from the beginning. Just kind of tell us what you were doing that day and how you got to the point. And maybe I may interrupt once or twice with a question, but let's hear your encounter.
Okay. It started, it was in November. I want to say it was deer season actually here in Texas. I'm not sure about Oklahoma, but it was snowing real heavy that day. We had 3 to 4 inches of snow on the ground, snowing big flakes. And I work in the oil field, so I was at the office. We all were on bad days like that. We usually just do paperwork and stay in the office, but I always tend to go out and run my route and just mainly look for deer tracks.
Well, good. Hey, quick question, Steve. Now you say
sir.
This was November. Was this just last November?
No, sir. It had been roughly 3 years ago.
Oh, okay. Still pretty current.
3-4 years ago.
Okay. So 2017, 2018, somewhere around there.
Yes, sir.
Okay. So you're out driving around, or you're going to go drive around. Tell us a little bit about what your livelihood is and what that entails and how that coincides with this.
I'm a pumper in the oil field, and basically I'm assigned X amount of wells, and it's my responsibility to upkeep and maintain those wells. So every day you're just basically running your route, getting your readings off your meters and troubleshooting, fixing any problems that might arise, just basically maintaining your wells.
Okay,
So,
and just roughly, how many wells are you responsible for?
right now I've got 117.
Oh, wow, that's okay. How many wells would you? Well, you can't possibly check all of those in one day, can you?
No, sir. We split it up. Generally, we try to make half of our route one day and finish up the second half the next day. And then the rest of the week, you go back and fix any problems that you might find or routine maintenance, things like that. Some of the wells have jacks, some don't. You know, there's always something.
Okay. Yeah. All right. So, yeah, excellent. So, yeah, go ahead and continue.
Okay. So this particular well I'm headed to, I like going to that well because it's way out in the middle of nowhere. And there's one way in, one way out. And there's opportunity to see a lot of wildlife. So that's the way I'm going. I'm going specifically to this well. And this well's right off the lease road going to the well is off of a county road, and that lease is shaped like a horseshoe, basically. The top half of the horseshoe facing east, the dead ends of the horseshoe facing west, and you enter right off the county road onto the lease road. The county road dead ends about a half mile from that spot. So I turn in on the lease road to go around. The particular well I'm going to is on the south end of the horseshoe dead end. It's about, that horseshoe shaped lease road is probably a mile wide, a mile and a half wide, somewhere in that distance. And as I'm going down to check this well, I drop off a little slight ridge. I always stop on top of that ridge and look across the whole bottom, looking for deer, critters, anything of that nature. Well, it was snowing so hard that day that I really couldn't see anything. So I drop down the ridge and continue on to my well. I get to my well, I check it. Everything's fine. I sat there for maybe a few minutes, and I go around my well, heading back out, and I didn't write my readings down while I was at the well, and I keep my notebook on my dash. So I reach up on my dash to get my notebook as I'm driving, just real slow, and I noticed something on the ridge in front of me, something walking on two legs. And I think, what's a hunter doing way out here? As I grab my notebook, and I set my notebook against my steering wheel, and I go to write my readings down, and in my mind I'm thinking, that's too big to be a person. That's not something's not right. And I look back up at this figure walking on the ridge, and it's slumped over slightly, and it's walking in a zigzag pattern, like back and forth walking. And the way it was walking, it didn't look right to me. It wasn't walking like how we walk, in other words.
Right. We're going to kind of walk more or less in a straight line. So you said this thing is kind of going a zigzag. So, and he's on if I understand correctly, he's on a hill, but he's just below the crest. So you can't see his outline, but is he kind of going up and down, moving across the hill, or?
Yes, sir. He would be moving. I'm facing south, going south, and he's going to the east. And he's not on top of the ridge. He's not skylined. He's down probably 20, 30 foot from the top of the ridge on a little flat there. And he's walking towards the east in a zigzag pattern. And what startled me, I guess, was not necessarily the size, it was the thickness of this thing. It was too big to be a man. There's no way. I didn't know what I was looking at, but I knew it wasn't a man. It wasn't a hunter. It was all brown, kind of a khaki color, I'd call it, like a Carhartt coat color. and its face, I could see the side profile kind of its face, but I couldn't make out no features. It was a different color than the body of this thing. And
Okay, I want to stop right there for a second. So you have some definition between the body of the creature, which is kind of uniform khaki, that Carhartt khaki color, we know what we're talking about, and the face, correct?
yes,
So you get
sir.
some definition on the face. Okay, all right, very good, thank you. Yeah, that's interesting.
And I start easing towards it more, and I'm riding the brake in my pickup, and it's continuing walking. I mean, not covering a lot of ground. It's moving to the east, and I'm going directly towards it now. Well, when it gets to say 11:30 from me, my brakes, I pushed on my brakes to stop my truck, and it made a squeak sound. And as soon as that sound, it wasn't real loud. It was just a wet brake sound. And as soon as that happened, this thing turned and looked right at me. As I'm looking at it, I mean, there's a million things going through my mind, trying to make sense, trying to figure out what it is, what I'm actually looking at. And now I can definitely see the color of its face is different than the color of the body. The face was kind of a light gray colored, like a firewood ash color, like a fire pit color. And it never stood straight upright. It was always in a bent over motion, not bent over, a tremendous amount, but slightly slumped over. And it's looking at me, and I'm looking at it at probably maybe a little more than 200 yards, roughly. Pretty within rifle distance, I'd say. I mean, 200 yards roughly, maybe a little more. And it just freezes. And it's looking at me, and I'm looking at it. And for some reason, I took my eyes off of it just for a second. I don't remember what I'd done with the notebook on my lap. Maybe I was moving it, maybe just for a split second. Whenever I glanced back up, now it's continuing east, but there's one tree on that ridge, and it's a mesquite tree. And I don't know if y'all know about mesquite trees. They're thorny, not really big trees, just more like an overgrown bush with thorns. And it stops at that mesquite tree. It squats down, and it's facing me, and its right hand is grabbing the tree, the trunk of the tree up, about the middle of the tree, and its arm, the forearm part of the arm is longer than the bicep part of the arm. I could see that, and we're just sitting there looking at each other. Well, as I start easing further towards it, 3 deer come out of the bottom. And these were all 3 bucks. And they were running like deer running 2 ways. I mean, when you startle them, they'll kind of scamper off a little bit. But these deer were running neck stretched out. I mean, full tilt coming up that road in front of me. I'll never forget the look on the white eyes of the deer. I mean, just like I could see the whites of the eyes, the mouth open, the tongue. I mean, these deer were running like a bear was after them. When the deer come up and I took my eyes off of whatever I was looking at to look at the deer, I put my eyes back to the mesquite tree where this creature was, and it's walking away from me now. And I don't know the distance from that tree to the ridge line there, but it covered that distance, I remember, in 3 steps. I could see the steps, 3 steps, as it's going away from me, and it disappears over that ridge. And I continue in my truck going back the way I came in, and I make it back to the county road, and I'm continuing west down that county road trying to make sense of everything, what I'd just seen. And here come them same 3 deer that come up out of the bottom across in front of me again, still running, just wide-eyed, full tilt. And they cross the road in front of me again. And like I said, the distance from where I originally saw them to where I'm at now is probably a mile and a half as a crow flies. Rough country. I mean, rough, hilly, rugged country. And I continue down that road, the county road, to the dead end, and then you cross the cattle guard, and you're on lease roads from that point on. And I went to my next location, probably a half mile away, and I was pretty shook up. And I called my foreman, who has been a lifelong friend, hunting partner. We done everything outdoors together, to tell him what I just saw, or what had just happened. And he had told me to stay there and he would come to me. So he came to me, and I told him the story of what just happened and what I'd seen. And he wanted to go back and look for tracks. And I told him no, that I wouldn't go back, not without a gun. And he knew I was shook up. We'd known each other our whole lives, We'd been out in the woods together. We'd done everything together. And we took off and went back to the office, and that's about the story there.
Let me ask you this: when from the time that you saw the deer, when you first saw them running, the 3 bucks, and then you said you saw them again later on, what kind of a time frame was that, and roughly the distance?
Not very long at all. Coming out of that location, I drove a little faster than I did going in.
Right.
Just a matter of minutes, if that. And the distance.
And you said it was pretty rough country. There's ravines that these things have to go down and up and over. I'm just trying to do speed, time, distance calculations in my head to think how fast these things are running.
They were, as a crow flies, it was probably a mile and a half from where they crossed my road again. And just like you said, up and down, rough, rugged country. I've been a hunter all my life, and mainly deer. These deer were running. I mean, they had been running. I mainly keyed in on the first one. that come up the ridge, and I could just tell they'd been running for a while. His tongue was out. I'll never forget how wide his eyes were. I've never seen that before. For some reason, that stuck in my mind.
And you associated their running, obviously they're running, they're very scared, and you think that's because of the creature. It's associated with the creature, perhaps more of them in this area. Is that correct? Or
Yes, sir. The ridge that the creature was on was above them. The deer were below them.
And do you think that would have been a good ambush point?
Well, not necessarily right there, but from where I dropped off the ridge was a perfect ambush point. There's a big cedar tree right there. There's a lot of mesquite right there at the ridge, and normally an animal's going to take the path of least resistance when it's running. And at the top of that ridge on that leash road was a pinch point. It would have been a perfect ambush spot for a predator. If I was hunting there, herding the deer, that's where I would sit to take them out.
Has anybody else, I apologize, I just want to ask real quick. Do you know if anybody else in the area, have you spoken with anybody else, associates or friends or family, that have reported or seen these creatures, either in this area or anywhere around there?
Well, there's always, every town's got a story, of a boogeyman or something to that nature. But nobody ever, I really didn't talk about it. I really, I just told a handful of people about it. My wife, my hunting partner, my best friend, and my boss. But no, I've never really heard of any other sightings at that time. After this incident all occurred, I started researching. I don't know why. I wanted to know what I'd witnessed, what I'd seen. And I'd heard stories or heard a podcast about south of where I am, back in the 50s, 40s maybe, that a farmer had shot one and buried it in a plum thicket because it kept messing with his livestock, messing with his house. But that was just one of them old stories.
Now, where did you hear that story? Was this from some of the locals or?
No, it was on a podcast, actually.
Okay.
I'd never thought of Bigfoot really, or Sasquatch, or you always hear the stories, Legend of Boggy Creek, all that, but it never, I never worried about it. I just never thought about it until then. And then after then, I got to researching, just trying to make sense of it all, I guess, because it really bothered me what I'd seen. I've been out in the woods all my life. I've hunted, I've fished ever since I could remember. And I've never been intimidated. I've seen hogs, I've seen cougars, I've never been scared, I guess you could say, until that point. And since that sighting, I've not hunted one time. I've not gone out in the woods at night. I've not fished. I've
it's
not
because
done
of this.
any.
Yeah, and it's because of this encounter, correct?
Yes, sir. because
So
of
one
that
of the things
encounter.
yeah, absolutely. No, I understand. It changes your perspective 100%. And you had told me that you had just kind of, we talked about it a little bit earlier. You had several $1,000s worth of hunting camping gear, and it's just sitting in your garage now, unused. Is that right?
Yes, sir. And the boat and everything, and I've not used it since. I've bought a few more guns, a few bigger guns since this incident.
Right. Understandable. Yeah, absolutely. And we talked a little bit also. I wanted to kind of do a comparison because when you saw the creature and then you became aware that it was aware of you, and there's that moment when the two of you are aware of each other's, it's you now know that he knows that I know that you know, that sort of thing. How does that feel? What was kind of running through your mind at that moment, and just kind of how are you feeling about that?
It was real troubling. Like danger. Like I had an immediate sense of danger that I was. It never threatened me, never made a motion to me or anything, but I felt that it was a danger to me. It was something that, not necessarily, I wouldn't say evil, but something that scared me, maybe.
Kind of malevolent.
Yeah, like I wasn't the top dog anymore. Whatever this
and
thing
the comparison,
was, I was beneath it.
yes, yeah, that's almost like we're a lesser being in its perspective. The comparison that I was kind of looking for was, briefly we spoke about, you had been charged at one point by a hog, and I've always thought that would just be terrifying to be charged by a wild hog, because they're just brutes and they're just going to tear you to pieces. How would you compare that fear to the fear of seeing this creature?
No comparison at all. I mean, when the hog was around me, sure, I was in danger, but it wasn't a fear. That fear feeling wasn't inside me. I mean, it ran me to my truck and put me up on the bed of my truck, but two totally different feelings. I've never since felt that before. I'd never felt it before. I've never felt it since then. That fear. It's hard to explain the feeling. It's, something's not right. You're intimidated.
Yeah, and I think Will has a real good term for that, and that is, when you first see one of these things, it's outside of your frame of reference of what what we know, and it's almost as if this doesn't belong. Is that?
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
It's
kind of accurately describes.
You're looking at something that's not supposed to exist. And you're trying to make sense of it.
So you haven't been back hunting, you haven't done any fishing. Even if you get your hunting friend, would you consider going back and going hunting again, or is it just completely something you've shelved for the time being?
It's on the shelf. This year I'm going to try to get out more when it warms up and start fishing more. I'll never go out unarmed ever again.
Yeah, I can imagine. Well, A very interesting encounter, and to me, it's fascinating because of the location, and just really appreciate you taking the time to share this with us. Will, did you have any comments or questions?
I don't. It's really fascinating, Steve. You know, and you're right. There is no comparison to having an encounter one of these creatures with anything, really.
If there is, I've yet to find it.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's almost unnatural.
Yeah.
You know, what you're looking at is unnatural.
That's a good description.
The way they walk, the way they're everything about it is just unnatural, or that's the sense that I got.
Well, you hit it on the head.
You know,
you're looking at something that's not supposed to exist.
And Will, we've talked about this. When you become aware that we're sharing our environment with an unknown hominid species that we're completely unaware of, it's a little bit, there's a whole lot of questions that come up. And so it's and it's scary, very much so.
And the questions come really fast. I mean, in your mind, your eyes, you know what you're seeing, but you're trying to make sense of it all. You know what?
Yeah,
it's not.
And there's no information, right? And there's no back information that we have. There's no studies in school. There's nothing that you've seen on TV per se to really give you a good understanding of what the creature is and where you fit in and where it fits in with us.
It's really unsettling. I hear people on these shows talk about they want to see one and they go out to look for them, and I'm just the opposite. I wish I'd never seen it. I mean, it's affected me that much. You know, I didn't want to see it. I wasn't looking for it. I wasn't, you know, and what I've lost since then was a big part of my life, essentially. I mean, I lived in the woods, and now I can't go out. You know, I can't go back out.
Well, completely understand. And Will, we have a saying about that, and I think that's applicable to Steve's encounter, is we're going to go to where they're not.
Right, and there really isn't any place like that.
Yeah, I agree. I think there's a lot more out there than people think.
Yeah, absolutely. Steve, listen, stay in touch, and really appreciate the time you took to share your encounter with us. If you get any more information, any encounters, just you know how to get a hold of us. Shoot me an email, and really appreciate your time tonight.
Yes, sir. Thank you all.
Yes, Steve, thank you. We really appreciate it.
Yes, sir.
Thanks for listening to this episode of Creek Devil. If you or anyone you know has had an encounter with these creatures, please contact us at williamjevning@yahoo.com. That's William, Jevning, @yahoo.com. All communication is confidential. Join us for another program next week. And until then, keep your eyes open out there.